Let's apply the theory on literature. This is Jane Eyre, first page. And Jane Eyre was written by Charlotte Bronte, but this is the pseudonym she had used when she began. This is the pseudonym she used, Currer Bell. And even this can be psychoanalytically studied. Why does she give a name like that to herself? Currer Bell. One, Currer is no name in English society at that time, and therefore it does not reveal the gender of the person. Then all the story throughout the text is about a female, and she wasn't the first to write about writing female stories. There were many females who had already written many novels based on the same thing. It was back in 17th, 18th century. There were many novelists who were writing novels, and then many men had already started writing stories that had female protagonists. She uses a name in Victorian society. She uses a name in Victorian society which does not reveal the gender of the person. So, chapter 1 begins with there was no possibility of taking a walk that day. We had been wandering, indeed, in the leafless shrubbery an hour in the morning, but since dinner, Mrs. Reed, when there was no company, dined early. The cold winter wind had brought with it clouds so sombre and a rain so penetrating that further outdoor exercise was now out of the question. I was glad of it. I never liked long walks, especially on chilly afternoons. Dreadful to me was the coming home in the raw twilight with nipped fingers and toes, and a heart saddened by the chidings of Bessie, the nurse, and humbled by the consciousness of my physical inferiority to Eliza, John, and Georgiana Reed. The said Eliza, John, and Georgiana were now clustered round their mamma in the drawing room. She lay reclined on a sofa by the fireside, and with her darlings about her, for the time neither quarrelling nor crying, looked perfectly happy. Me she had dispensed from joining the group, saying she regretted to be under the necessity of keeping me at a distance, but that until she heard from Bessie, and could discover by her own observation that I was endeavouring in good earnest to acquire a more sociable, childlike disposition, a more attractive and sprightly manner, something lighter, franker, more natural, as it were, she really must exclude me from privileges intended only for contented, happy little children. What does Bessie say I have? I asked. Jane, I don't like cavillers or questioners. Besides, there is something truly forbidding in a child taking up elders, taking up her elders in that manner. Be seated somewhere, and until you can speak pleasantly, remain silent. A breakfast room adjoined the drawing room. I slipped in there. It contained a bookcase. I soon possessed myself of a volume, taking care that it should be one stored with pictures. I mounted into the window seat, gathering up my feet. I sat cross-legged like a Turk, and having drawn the red moreen curtain nearly close, I was shrined in double retirement. Who will begin? A, not believing in Oedipus complex, you won't be the only person who doesn't believe in the Oedipus complex. Um, it may be many others. In fact, it may be everybody who doesn't believe in the Oedipus complex, or particularly so about the castration complex. Nobody believes in castration complex. Nobody will agree that he or she has ever felt being castrated, or the boy not being castrated. Anybody can reject that idea, and it's not that You happen to be the first person to reject it. This has been rejected by psychologists. And this is 1900s when Freud is writing, and there has been a lot of research that has followed him to this day in 2020. And a lot of new research has come under the study of child psychology, child psychiatry, and nobody reads Freud in this day. Why do we study psychoanalysis from Freud? It's same as why do we study structuralism from Saussure, right? So he is the father of psychology, psychoanalysis. That's why we go back to Freud before going to who followed Freud. So where did the others, the rest, like Lacan we are doing next, where did Lacan get his ideas? His father too was Freud himself. And Freud has been criticized on many points, this being one, castration complex or Oedipus complex. Some even question about Oedipus complex not being a normal thing. Or there are millions of feminists who nip at every point that Freud makes. That's why Freud is not followed to a very large extent these days, except for what remains to be fresh and still dialogued in psychology is his analysis of defense mechanisms, how defense mechanisms work in a body. So now, who will come into the discussion? Where does psychoanalysis figure in these lines? Not exactly the dark continent. He says she is, it's a dark place. Female psychology is a dark place, which is inaccessible. And that was the same time when African continent was called a dark continent. So it's not that he calls her a dark continent, he calls her a dark place, who is like an enigma as Africa is. So tell me who will come into the discussion. Tell me, where does psychoanalysis work? Which line here? Talk about Jane Eyre. Right. The manner in which the girl child is told to behave. Yes, Zora, you are totally right. She is asked to behave, and she is told that she will not get the privileges that her children get because her behavior is not like the, the behavior of her children. Unless she stops being all this that's written. I read the lines again. She has had dispensed from joining the group, saying she regretted to be under the necessity of keeping me at a distance. So, generally, what you are told about Mrs. Bessie is that she's a bad character. This idea you get to understand from the um, record, details, narrative you get from Jane. But look at the first line. It's she regretted. She says, she regretted to be under the necessity of keeping me at a distance. Means she would love to have her close like her children. But she is forced. She regrets it that she has to keep her at a distance and she is not allowed to join the group. She regrets, the word is regretted. She regretted. To be under the necessity means she's forced of keeping me at a distance, of keeping Jane Eyre at a distance. But until she heard from Bessie, until the nurse tells her that she has turned good, everything is good about her, she cannot do otherwise. Until she heard from Bessie and could discover by her own observation that I was endeavoring in good earnest to acquire a more sociable, childlike disposition, a more attractive and sprightly manner, something lighter, franker, more natural, as it were, she really must exclude me from privileges intended only for contented, happy little children. So apparently, she is none of these. No content, no happy like the other children. And you happen to you tend to believe parts of what Mrs. Reed says. I have myself read this when I it was my first year of honors. It gives me totally a different understanding of the narrativity used here. And what I read when I read it first, back in my first year of honors, was like I trusted the story of Jane Eyre because Jane Eyre was the name typed on the front page of the book. But today I don't trust her. I don't trust her because I feel Mrs. Reed is so genuine. She loves her. And she says Jane Eyre is not content and happy, and she is totally right. Jane Eyre is never content. She is never happy. Even after getting married, you don't feel she is happy. She is content. It's just that the story ends abruptly. It's Charlotte Bronte who is content and happy, but Jane Eyre is never content and happy. And then her mannerism, her not having a childlike disposition. We don't see her, but her disposition is apparent that she is not childlike. Where do you see that? She says, unless she heard from Bessie, means she did. It appears Jane Eyre does not like Bessie because she says, what does Bessie say I have done? She disregards the other part she had said, Mrs. Reed had said, and could discover by her own observation. And could discover by her own observation. Her is she. Mrs. Reed also would try to figure it out herself by her own observation. But this is where she hates Bessie and asks, what does Bessie say I have done? It's unlike a child. It's franker. It's being too frank. Jane, I don't like cavillers or questioners. Besides, there is something truly forbidding in a child taking up her elders in that manner. Well, that's right. I trust her. But here again, be seated somewhere and until you can speak pleasantly, remain silent. So, this is making her a social character, making her, yeah, Zora, try to fit in the place of being a graceful girl in the defined quote unquote Victorian society. This is how you ought to be. And apparently, her own children are like that because she has brought them up. Jane Eyre has been brought by her parents. And then, where is the attraction? Eliza, Joan, Georgia are clustered round their mama. But this aunt who has brought her up still regrets the necessity of having her at a distance. She has the love for this child too. She has the motherly feeling towards this female child too. And this female child hates both Bessie and Mrs. Reed. Now look at the same sexed rival. And she will tell you that she loved Mr. Reed, her uncle, because he plays the opposite sexed parent here. Is that clear? So any questions here? The next part that follows, this was the analysis of Oedipus complex, or pre-Oedipal and Oedipal stages, and then followed by how do we apply psychoanalytic theory on literature. Apart from that, what follows is a study of interpretation of dreams. So what does Freud say about dreams and how we access the unconscious? Do you have any questions so far regarding this part?